Well, it's a great pleasure to me and Harmy to welcome onto the show outgoing CEO of Cricket West Indies, Johnny Grave. It's been an eventful 7 years, Johnny. Many congratulations. You've been through a lot. I guess we all went through COVID, but you've staged three World Cups at various age group and women's level, and it's been quite the journey, which I know Harmy's got lots of questions about for you. But how would you sum up your tenure, and do you have mixed feelings about leaving?
Um, yeah, I probably do in some respects. I'm very happy and content in the decision that effectively we've made, which is that the time is right for me to move on. I never ever dreamt that I would survive last, still be here 7.5 years after I came out here on what was a bit of an adventure, and I knew it would be a huge and enormous challenge. But yeah, I leave here with very fond memories, both professionally and also personally. My young family spent most of their lives now living up in Antigua, and it's been a phenomenal experience and one that I will always cherish and look back on. And yeah, I've made lots of friends over here, and yeah, it's been a very special time. But as you're right, it's been a hell of a roller coaster, but one that I've not done on my own. And I came over here in 2017 at the same time as a good mate of mine, Jimmy Adams, and actually Stuart Law, who became the head coach at the same time. And for all three of us, it was a bit of a leap into the unknown. But West Indies cricket for me is such a special brand. It's such an amazing place and region that when given the opportunity, I couldn't really say no.
Johnny, we've known each other for a number of years now, working with the PCA and dealings. That can be a challenging job across 450 professional cricketers and the elite England players and everything that goes with it. But I must admit, CEO of the West Indies Cricket Board, that's got to be, if not the hardest job in the world, because of in cricket anywhere, because of what, six territories, the islands you've got to deal with. Just give a little sample of what it is in the CEO's intro when you're dealing with all these different nations.
Yeah, I think I probably didn't know that much about those intricacies when I joined, which was probably a good thing. The difference and the between Guyana and Jamaica, for example, or the strength of that national identity as well as the regional identity. For me, it's always been West Indies cricket as the brand, the maroon, seeing a united winning team for most of my life, but not really understanding quite how different, obviously geographically, and population size, that Jamaica's 3 million and Antigua might only be 100,000 and Guyana is South America. But that difference and that national pride that exists is certainly something that's completely unique. But also, my positive outlook at life, it's an amazing opportunity as well in terms of tapping into that national pride as well as the regional pride. The politics, I think it's probably overplayed, is my summation. And you touch on the politics of the PCA and Team England and 18 counties and the test match grounds and the non-test match grounds. People act when they talk to me about politics in West Indies cricket like there is no politics in English cricket, and everyone's on the same page and everyone's going in the same direction, and it's all very sensible, and there's no self-interest, and it's all about the sport and growing the game, and it's this land of milk and honey. But I think you and I would know enough opportunities over the years where that maybe hasn't been the case and continues to be. So there's politics in sport. There's definitely politics in the West Indies, and yeah, look, we've got 15 governments, 15 prime ministers, 15 you know governor generals, 15 sports ministers, 15 tourism ministers. We've got six territorial boards, but then within the leewards and windwards, there's another four boards in windwards and seven in the leewards. So it's a complex environment, and there's obviously this huge legacy and some of the best players that have ever played the game as well, and that all interplays along with all the other politics of world cricket in terms of the three different formats, the franchise opportunities that are now existing. Yeah, which means it's been a busy 7.5 years, and then you throw in a couple of years of COVID, and you can see by the state of my lack of hair and the colour of it what it's done. But it's as I said to Maris at the start, it's been an amazing experience and one that certainly have no regrets. And I do feel probably that I'm hopefully in the next 2.5 months, I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure that when I do leave and hand over, that I'm trying to leave it in a better position and set up for the next person to come in and be more successful.
Johnny, you can include the new mooted test fund, which is actually revitalized, hasn't it? I mean, they first tried to establish this test fund, what was it, almost a decade ago now. But as your tenure as West Indies cricket, have you been having to count the pennies all the time and cut corners? I mean, I forgive the analogy, but everyone loves a great busker, but unless you drop a few quid into the hat, then he's not going to carry on. And the world loves the West Indies. Everyone talks about the game being better with a strong West Indies, but you just haven't had the cash, have you?
No, I mean, when I joined, we had a reasonable size overdraft. We had a little bit of money because we'd had some successful tours. We'd had obviously a good World Cup in 2016 where we won all three that has never been done before in terms of the men's, the women's, and the under-19s. So, I would say most months the challenge of meeting that financial target to, as I would say, keep the lights on has never been far away. Probably have had 12 months actually where we haven't had to do that, which has been quite a refreshing change, to be honest. But I knew the region was an expensive region, so high cost, low revenue. But you talk about, for me, it's stark in first class cricket. Whereas, if Harmy's playing a 4-day game back in the day for Durham, and they're jumping in their own cars, they're filling it with their own petrol. They might get a small 26p, I think it was in my day at Surrey, where players would be able to claim expenses on petrol. But we have to put on a charter flight. We have to put on, very expensive, and it's not like an EasyJet flight or BA flight where it's 150 quid to fly from Newcastle to London. You're talking about $500-600 per person without baggage. So it's unbelievably expensive to operate any cricket system on a regional basis because of regional travel. And I'm really talking pre-COVID, post-COVID. With the challenges that regional travel had during that period, it's even more expensive, and the schedules are even smaller and more restricted now. So the challenges of operating regionally, we have a big under-15s, under-17s, under-19s program, which is kind of the cornerstone of when our high performance system starts and that talent ID really kicks in. But you're talking about flying in 150 people for a month into a high cost region. So you're talking upwards of $500,000 US just for an under-15s tournament, so that the best 14-year-olds from Barbados can play against the best 14-year-olds from Jamaica. So the whole cost base of West Indies cricket is very, very high. And because we don't have a regional satellite company like a Fox or a Star Sports or a Sky, who do two things. One, they pay a rights fee, but they also cover the production costs. So we're having to fly around 60 odd very expensive people, again, put them up in hotels, again, charter them around, because we have to pay for the broadcast costs, which are, probably $5 million over the course of a year. So while England and Australia will be starting at plus hundreds of millions from their domestic broadcast deal, we start at minus 5 million. So everything becomes a financial challenge. So a long way of answering your question is, the finances of West Indies cricket are, the biggest challenge to not just maintain, but also what we needed to, which was invest and further professionalize the game on and off the field. So, I would say it's been the biggest challenge, but probably the biggest success, because we were able to attract India and England coming out of COVID to tour in both 22 and 23. We were able to join forces with the US and win the bid of the World Cup. We probably had almost $25 million worth of debt in 2018, and we've probably got in excess of $25 million of surpluses now. So it's a very different picture. And we've been able to change the mindset here because we have a political system that's 2 years. But obviously the business of cricket works on a 4-year cycle. So over that 4 years, you might get an England tour, you might get an India tour, where you have to make as much money as you can. And that subsidise the next 2 years where you don't have them. But obviously, if you've got a political environment where if Harmy's the president when England and India are touring, he can tell everyone he's a financial genius and he's got this big war chest. And you might have a genuine financial genius come in, but he's got Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Pakistan, and everyone thinks negatively. So We've been able to change that mindset. So we budget now on a 4-year cycle. We know that we need a large amount of cash when England depart the region in December. And we hope that we have enough in order to maintain and continue the investments that we've identified in the strategic plan to improve the cricket. And that's all just about trying to make good decisions and choices, because you can't do everything. So I guess that's a kind of a sort of summary of the challenges. But you're right, probably the last 12 months have been the only time in my 7.5 years where I haven't genuinely worried about meeting our minimum obligations at the end of every month.
And Johnny, what about the players? During my time, there was it was the end of the probably golden generation, but you still had the likes of Lara and Gail, and one or two others who were unbelievably Test cricketers. Now, I heard Andre Russell say the other day, it's not about the money. I mean, it is about the money and trying to keep your players in a position to play Test match cricket. We did something on talkSPORT a few weeks ago with Joel Garner, and Joel Garner said in the 80s and the 70s and 80s, the West Indies came and they helped out a hell of a lot of countries because of brand West Indies was what everybody wanted to have. Is it time the other countries help the West Indies and help the other, sort of what's called the smaller nations? Because to keep Test cricket's lights on, it's not about the big three. And when I look at your team coming over to England this year, it's probably the most togetherness West Indies team I've seen for quite a long time, something to build on. But it's trying to keep your players engaged without them going off into the franchise world.
Yeah, no, I think the number one task I was given when I joined was around, and I guess having had a 10-year time at the PCA, was to rebuild and repair those player relationships, which obviously having someone alongside you like Jimmy Adams, who has and commands that respect from all those players, made life a hell of a lot easier. But yeah, we created that IPL and CPL window with our players and made it contractually sacrosanct. So there was no mistrust. They knew then they didn't have to choose between their own financial well-being and playing for the West Indies. And when I joined, I think we had Pakistan come here in April, May. So players couldn't play the IPL if they wanted to play for West Indies. And then England had created a white ball tour for us in September. So again, if you wanted to play with your mates, in front of your friends and family in the Caribbean Premier League, which is one of the biggest earners for our players, you couldn't if you wanted to play for the West Indies. So we removed those barriers pretty quickly, which helped. We stopped banning players, which also helped. I think when I joined, most of the players had been banned. I think even Nicholas Pooran, who was only 20 at the time, was banned. So we stopped doing that, which clearly helps if you want players to play for you. And had lots of honest and lots of dialogue, informally as well as formally. I think now you're right, the players are united. They're not underpaid, but wouldn't have to go and show my age now, but England players would have been delighted in 2005 winning the Ashes if what an average international West Indian could earn now. And they're always going to earn more in the franchise world than they can here. So it's all about balance for me. How can we continue to have that dialogue with the players, understand they have choices, not take the hard line, work with them, where you can maybe, and they deserve it and they've earned it because they've been loyal for a number of years. Give them a bit more flexibility and freedom towards the latter part of their careers. We certainly feel very strongly that young players need to learn the game, and you develop and learn the game quicker playing long form cricket. So we do try and actively encourage the younger players not to go down that franchise route too early, which is a massive challenge. And we certainly haven't been successful in all cases there. But it gives me a lot of hope when you hear young Shamar Joseph talking passionately about playing for the West Indies, playing Test cricket. I think he's probably still learning. And that was the big takeaway for me for the England series, is these guys are still learning the game, and they're a young team. When you look at their first class numbers of caps, Test caps, they're very green, and therefore understanding your own body, understanding, and you know this far better than me, how to load up and prepare for a 3-match back-to-back Test series, even if you've been playing in your eyes and training during the IPL, the demands and how you load your body for a Test match series is completely different. So I think a number of those players, probably outside of Jayden Seales, who had that time at Sussex, were undercooked, not because of necessarily playing too much short form cricket, just still learning the game and understanding the demands of the game. And certainly there's no harder tour really for a West Indian young batsman with a limited first-class history behind them than facing Jimmy Anderson in a farewell test at Lords. And then, that attack that probably, certainly as an Englishman, surprised me to see how some of those younger players hit their straps and cause our players so much difficulty. And it was always going to be runs that I thought we were going to struggle with. But disappointing we didn't win that last test match against South Africa, again, having taken 20 wickets and bowled well and got into winning positions. That was disappointing. But I still feel we're developing as a test match team. Obviously, we're doing well as a T20. We obviously messed up what in a sense was a quarter final against South Africa, who we'd beaten 3 times in the warm-ups, leading into that. And then semi-final, finals, any one game. But I think, certainly under the leadership of Darren Sammy and the white ball teams are heading in the right direction. And I think, although the Gabba seems a long time ago now and the summer's been very disappointing, I still feel we've got some players who want to play Test cricket. I think as a bowling unit, we've got a pretty young team and we've got some great youngsters coming through the academies. So there's certainly not doom and gloom there. But yeah, the player relationship one is always going to be a challenge. And if the leagues continue to grow and expand and fill up the calendar and also offer, unprecedented money, some of our guys are getting $500 for 4 weeks work. And again, Harmy, you know what bowlers are like, 4 overs, 6 games in a month and get $500,000, rather than play 4-day cricket and have to fly around the region and bowl 30 overs and, in this heat, in this hot sun during the day. It is a difficult challenge to keep them wanting to have a red ball in hand, but it's something we're very passionate about. And I think players are starting to understand and also see through their own eyes that younger, talented players that have taken the white ball only route too early have maybe not made as much progress as they perhaps would have. And maybe for the Nicholas Pourans and Shea Hopes, maybe their chance to play red ball cricket is now gone. So we've got to focus on that younger generation.
Johnny, it's one thing hearing Shamar Joseph talk about Test cricket with enthusiasm. He's 23 years old. I was more moved by Kavem Hodge, who played first-class cricket for 12 years before finally getting his West Indies call-up. And, I wasn't alone in feeling a little despondent by Andre Russell's comments a couple of weeks ago when he said that West Indies players weren't interested in first-class cricket. So is it overplayed, the demise of first-class cricket in Test cricket in the West Indies? And while you ponder that, can I just ask you, because you're a chief executive and you understand finances better than Harmy and I ever will, you said if the leagues continue to grow, is there a false financial foundation on which they have been constructed? I mean, is there enough money? Can they keep growing? Can they keep offering this much money? Harmy and I spoke to the owner of one of the MLC teams, and he said that we won't make money for 5 years. We'll spend millions and millions, but there's no guarantee that they will make money. Sorry, I've given you a whole load to answer there.
No, look, we called in 2018 as a board to ICC for regulations in T20 leagues. They eventually sort of came into force, but dubbed down a bit in 2023. And that was mainly because suddenly England were losing white ball players and Jason Roy and others to the US, and that Australia was suddenly getting players saying no to the Big Bash to go and play in Dubai. So it was really when it affected the big teams that they woke up and really saw what we've been seeing for best part of 5-6 years. No, I don't think the leagues, most of them probably outside of the big nations aren't sustainable. The Caribbean Premier League here has been going 11 years. It's only recently breaking even, and that's because it's propped up and supported hugely by the governments of the region rather than a domestic broadcast. I think the likes of SA20, when you've got Super Sports backing, or the 100 or the Blast in England supported by Sky, and vice versa, the BBL with Seven and Fox, and obviously the IPL is the biggest show in town. When you have that, they're very stable because they're economic based. But the newer leagues, where you've got no real home talent, you've got no real domestic market in terms of either fan base of people who want to buy tickets or broadcasters, the danger is that they give away a lot of this content. And so the big media companies are saying, well, why would I pay for bilateral cricket if I can put on a load of cricket that's short form and and free. So it is destabilizing the market. There does need to be, again, like I said, with the players, you've got to have balance. I think as international boards, most of us control our leagues in some way, shape, or form. And whilst Cricket West Indies don't 100% own CPL, we still have huge influence over it. So I think it is about, again, competitive balance for me is the way forward. Obviously, this part of the world, you're more exposed, and I spend more time in the US. The US philosophy around sport, is so polar opposed to that more recent UK mindset with the Man Cities and the Chelseas in my day, when big owners come in, spend all the money, and by spending all the money they win. The US mindset is all about we're only as strong as the weakest team. We have a draft system that gives the weakest teams the first pick. We want that competitive balance. We want every fan to know that the opposition has an opportunity to win, and therefore you don't have that dominance by one or two teams. And I guess, if you look at the business of La Liga or Serie A, where you've only got one or two teams that have dominated, the economic model of those leagues haven't grown as much as the Premier League, where, clearly, despite Man City's recent dominance, there's still a reasonable amount of competitive balance within the overall league where anyone can beat anyone on their day. And there's a top six that are still, vying for the top few spots. But yeah, I think cricket as a game needs to think much more as a league and as a team. It needs to understand everyone's business models a bit better. And I think there are some positive noises from the big three. I think the Test Fund was a good initiative. I don't know that $15 million a year will make any difference to anything. I think the idea of paying a test fee of $10,000 is not even window dressing. I mean, we pay our players $10,000. So I sort of smiled when I saw that come out in the press, going, well, how's that going to change cricket? And how's that going to be the saviour of Test cricket when our players are already getting paid that? So it's not going to make any difference to us. What will make a difference, in my opinion, to improve West Indies Test cricket is by playing more 3-match series rather than 2-match series, by having dedicated test windows where you're not competing against franchise opportunities, of actually supporting our A-team program. We really struggle to get A-team tours. But actually, the best stepping stone for a player to go from, I don't think any player that I've ever met in my 25 years of working the game has said that, there's very little difference between playing county championship and test match cricket, or for us playing West Indies. It's completely different. And the A-team environment does help in terms of, even if the standard's not, is still a big difference in standard, at least you're touring, you're away from home, you're playing in foreign conditions, so that when you next go to England, some of the things that you're facing as a human rather than as a cricketer, you're a bit more accustomed to. And little things like that would make, in my opinion, more of a difference to West Indies cricket than, 15 million divided by 12 test match teams. That's still significant money to Cricket West Indies, but it's a rounding error for lots of others. And paying players minimum fees, maybe, but Harmy will tell you, do you want to go to England against a red ball that's moving all over the place and swinging round corners for $30,000 for a 3-test series? Or do you want to go to America and play 6 games where you're bowling 4 overs and you can whack it for 6, and if you get out, so what? And if you tee off, then you're a hero and you're going to get paid 400 grand. You're not the difference in earnings. I don't think people understand enough, because otherwise you wouldn't suggest it. Because any person, in my opinion, for the same amount of time, $30,000 versus 400,000, it's not the world's toughest decision in my book. So, but I welcome the debate, and I'm not saying that I or we in West Indies have all the answers, but we welcome the debate. We welcome the slight change in mindset, which is the big three just can't play against themselves. They've got to have some stronger opposition. We've got to get jeopardy back in. We've got to get competitive balance. And to a certain extent, some of that has changed. The fact that we hosted the 2024 World Cup was a change in mindset and philosophy, because the previous 8 years, all those high revenue men's events were exclusively held in England, Australia, and India. So the fact that we've hosted one, the US has, the fact that South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia will co-host, that New Zealand will co-host with Australia, and Ireland with England, that is a change in mindset that we welcome. So, but hopefully, we can continue on that path of you know, thinking as a team, thinking like we're a game of cricket and that we all rely and need each other, and just, you know, maybe a little bit less self-interest and a bit more love and care for the long-term future of the game would help.
Yeah, I know. I'm a fast bowler, Johnny, and we're known for not being the brightest, but 30,000 over 400,000. I think that even makes sense to us. Just finally from me, mate. Obviously, it's what you've done for the West Indies is, I think, should be celebrated and shouted from the rooftops. And I hope you have an enjoyable last couple of months in post. What's left for Johnny Grave? Is it going to be back in cricket? Is it going to be a bit of time? Have you seen something on the horizon that floats the boat?
Play some golf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have as Harm and I are probably over golfed in my time, certainly in the PCA. So the balance has been addressed with my 7 years here, where I've probably only played 3 times a year. So yeah, look, I'm definitely going to have a break between now and Christmas, and probably spend a bit of time in this part of the world, South America, whatever, and go a bit of travelling. But I'd love to stay involved in cricket. It's been 7 great years at Surrey County Cricket Club, 10 years at the PCA, and 7 years here. Cricket's all I've really done for 25 years. But again, whether there's a role in that or not, I certainly wouldn't not consider other sports or working outside of a non-rights holder environment. I've worked for the Players Association, a club, a venue, and now an international board. So yeah, look, I definitely need a job. So if you hear of any, Harmy, let me know.
But I'll shout your name every time.
Hopefully something that will come up in the new year. But I'm certainly wanting to finish here very strongly. And funnily enough, I was reminded that my last day is going to be West Indies v England in a one-day international at Sir Viv Richards Stadium. And actually the first game back in February 2017 was West Indies v England in a one-day international at Sir Viv Richards Stadium. So it definitely feels like the right time to be going and leaving West Indies in certainly rude financial help and health, and with the academy set up that we put in place a couple of years ago, and the asset that Harmy would have seen, you know, the Coolidge Cricket Ground, the old Stanford ground that we now own as a fully 22-acre site to develop into a proper high performance centre. I think, you know, that with some of those sentiments that the big three are talking about, hopefully, you know, there's you know, even brighter future for West Indies cricket, and what everyone wants here, and what I will continue to want as a big West Indies fan forever, you know, is to see West Indies men and women consistently performing and getting back up to the top of the world, and people genuinely thinking not just in T20s but in the 50 over form, which has been our weakest by far, and in Test series, that West Indies have got a fair chance of winning them home and away. And yeah, I long for that, and I certainly feel the passion is still here, and we're still producing fantastic players. So yeah, hopefully brighter future on the pitch, which is clearly something that I've not really achieved in my 7.5 years, but hopefully I've done some other things that mean that in the future there will be success on the field.
Johnny, many thanks for your time. Congratulations for what you've done. Thank you for the hospitality that you've always shown us when we've been out there. Cricket will be a much poorer place and a poorer game without you, so make sure you don't leave it. Thank you again. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app, and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.